Hi, I'm Nabila and I've been sewing for a majority of my life, so that means I've made a lot of sewing mistakes. So today I thought I would make this video as if I was talking to the younger version of myself who is just starting on their sewing journey, and just think about what I would tell myself if I could go back in time. Now, the younger version of myself honestly did not like being told what to do. Who does? So she might not listen to me. And if you also don't like being told what to do, consider this video like me gossiping on myself. So the first mistake that I would make often on my sewing journey in the beginning was not pre-washing my fabric. Oh my god, can you believe that she didn't pre-wash her linen? That's right, I didn't pre-wash my linen before I made a pair of linen pants with a polyester lining. So when it came time to wash that pair of pants for the first time, the linen shrunk and the lining didn't, so the lining was then sticking out of the pants. And it was a really sad story. So please don't be like me, pre-wash your fabric, especially if it's a natural fiber like linen, cotton, or silk. The only exception to this rule for me is special occasion fabric, which is probably gonna be dry cleaned anyway. The next mistake I have made was trying to copy a pattern from a stretchy garment into a woven fabric. So when I was a beginner, I once tried to clone a stretchy rib knit tank and make it in a solid woven fabric, and I wondered why that didn't work. This mistake could have been avoided entirely if I had understood ease, which is the extra space added into a garment beyond the body measurements, which allows for comfort and movement. Knit garments generally, but not always, have negative ease, and woven garments have positive ease. If all of this is sounding too complicated, all you need to know as a beginner is that if you're trying to clone something in your wardrobe, notice if the fabric is woven or knit, and try to match a woven to a woven fabric or a knit to a knit. As you get more comfortable with each fabric type, you could try to use cloned patterns to inform a new design, even if you're not matching fabric types. But realize that generally speaking, if you're starting with a woven and going into a knit garment, the end result might be too big, and the opposite is true if you're going from a knit to a woven garment. Generally, not always. You're welcome to play around with switching between these two fabric types, but try not to get discouraged like I was feeling that day, because it is a little bit of a tricky thing to do. Okay, this one might be just a personal frustration of mine, but I hate when I mix up my left and right sleeve after I've cut my fabric. So now I always try to mark which one is the left and the right. And I think I find this especially helpful because I tend to cut my fabric the day before I'm about to sew it. So there's some time there where I could have forgotten which side is the right side of the fabric, which makes things even more confusing. Also, one more tip about sleeves specifically, I have sewn the wrong side out one too many times. So now in order to make sure I don't make that mistake, I tend to pin my sleeve to my armscye and then just double check after I pinned that the right sides of my fabric are facing each other, because I just am so sick of seam ripping the sleeve off and doing that all over again. So it's better to check when you're in the pinning stage and you can correct yourself more easily. Okay, the next mistake that I feel I've made is losing out on details that make a piece special because I am being impatient. Just in general, I think when I was starting out in my sewing journey, I was trying to get things done as fast as possible. And while being an effective sewist is still really satisfying for me, these days I really like to take my time and make sure there are special little details in everything I make, because that's what brings me joy in getting dressed as well. So I will reach for a piece over and over again just because of those special little details that I know I've added. Okay, this mistake can really make or break a garment for me, and it's when I don't stop to think about the hem or the finishing until it's too late. So I tend to self-draft a lot of my pieces meaning I don't have some instructions in front of me. I have to think through all the finishings and what seam allowance they might need before I cut my fabric. So now I think about how I'm going to finish each edge in the sketching portion of my design process, and that really helps me think through all those details before I cut any fabric. And actually, to take it a step further, sometimes I will write down all the instructions of how I'm going to sew pieces together when I am still making the pattern, and that really helps me think through every little detail before I get there. And I think this is just really important for me as someone who self-drafts. But if you are still a beginner and you're using patterns, this should all be laid out for you. But this is just something to think about if you ever want to step away from using home sewing patterns and get into that self-drafting journey. I really recommend it. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, you definitely need to think through all your seam allowance before you cut out your fabric. Okay, the next mistake is a tough one, and maybe not everyone will want to hear this, but it is buying fabric without a plan in a color or fiber content that I wouldn't wear. So there was a fabric store in my area that had a whole room of discounted fabric, and I would always take a tour of the room whenever I made a trip down there, and I would pick up anything that caught my eye just because it was discounted. But then I ended up with a lot of fabric laying around that I will never use and I have no desire to wear. Since realizing that this fabric was piling up, I have been trying to use such fabric for different muslins whenever those needs arise. But nowadays, I would much rather save my money and not spend it on the discounted fabrics, and instead maybe I would buy an extra half yard of some nice fabric that I'm eyeing for a specific project. When I'm buying fabric for projects nowadays, I'm usually going for a natural fiber. And if I have an extra half yard of that fabric, I'm actually way more likely to use it towards something else than some of the synthetic fabrics that I have laying around. And it's kind of like sewist self-care to have a little bit of extra fabric for your project in case you need to cut something out again or patch up a hole or something like that. It's just nice to have a little bit of extra wiggle room in your fabric. Okay, that's all for today's video. If you have made any of these similar sewing mistakes, or if you have any unique ones, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!